Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an open conversation. I'm Monica Neubauer, and I am so thrilled today to have my friend Breeda Miller with us today. And she's going to interview me. I'm so nervous. Breeda, introduce yourself, please, to our listeners as we open this up.
Hey there, Monica. Yeah, it is fun to switch roles, isn't it?
I will see.
Yeah. So my name is Breeda Kelly Miller, and I like to call myself a recovering caregiver. I was my mother's caregiver for nearly 6 years in my home. My husband and I had three young children at the time. My mom had congestive heart failure. She had a stroke. She couldn't live on her own, and she developed vascular dementia. So she didn't have Alzheimer's disease, but she had dementia, which it's a type, and Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. And there are lots of different types. Some are worse than others,
Yep.
but they're all pretty heartbreaking. And I cared for her through hospice care in my home. So I have had a lot of experience in this. And now I help other caregivers understand that it's really important to take a break before you break, to care for yourself so that you are better able to care for others.
Yes. And you're even bringing your message to the big stage.
Yeah, I am. And this is it's scary, but it's huge. I am a professional speaker, and I speak to a lot of organizations, professional and family caregivers, about the value of self-care. And I use the power of story to get that message home. And I've expanded that and taken my experiences, and I have written, are you ready? A one-woman show. I had the world premiere in Michigan just about a month ago, and it's the best thing I've ever done. And my plan now is to tour across the country and to offer this show as an event, as a fundraising event for nonprofit organizations instead of a big gala or something. So yeah, it's exciting. It's coming together, and I can't wait to see where Mrs. Kelly's journey home takes me.
Wow, that's so exciting. One thing I was just seeing there is for yourself, your caregiving journey had a certain amount of time. You actually have other caregiving stories, so I know there was more to your life than that.
Yeah.
But this is something that when that time period was over, you have begun something new and different. And so that's even one lesson right here for caregivers is that generally things shift. It's not always the same.
It's so true. And there was one point when I was really low. I was spent. I was exhausted. I was not taking good care of myself. And a dear friend of mine looked at me and she said, Breeda, this won't last forever.
Mm,
And at that moment, I thought, oh, please, God, please don't let this last forever, because it was rough.
right.
But then I felt guilty about
Yes.
feeling that way.
Yeah.
And but I do think it's important because for many caregivers who are really in stressful, high maintenance caregiving situations, that's how they define themselves, how they define their value, how they define their role. And once their caregiving days are over, they often feel like a ship that's unmoored. They feel they have no sense of purpose,
Yep.
and they feel lost. And so that's another area that I work to help people figure out what's the next chapter, what's the next step. How can you use these experiences in a positive and productive way, and to make sure that it's not about what's left of you, it's what's the best of you.
The best of you. I love that. So tell us what your website is, Breeda.
It's my name. It's breedamiller.com. So it's BREEDA Miller.com.
Great. All right. Well, let's dig in. Our audience has heard, if they've listened to the prior three episodes, they've heard Mark's story and how he and I have been managing it. And I like to be in the control seat of the episodes, but I was challenged to share my story, and I invited Breeda to interview me. So, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, there you go. I know it's going to be hard. So, there's so many different types. Just as there's many different types of people, there's so many different types of caregivers. How would you describe your role as a caregiver?
Well, that's one of the things for me. Sometimes I feel I have to say, okay, I am a caregiver because my situation is not as hard as so many people's situation is much more life consuming than my situation. So I call it Caregiver Lite. I own that I'm a caregiver, but I call
Yeah.
it light, Lite, because my husband does take care of himself. I don't have to take care of him so much. So much. I mean, there's certainly areas where I am taking care of him and I'm watching out for his mental health and engaging with him. I'm taking care of more parts of the family because of that. But also, I'm not physically having to care for his physical needs or tend to him in bed or
Mhm,
anything like that. So it's
mhm,
different
mhm.
that way.
It's different, but it's I guess what I would say to you and every caregiver to own it, as it sounds like you have, and not to diminish it. That
Correct.
I think that people sometimes feel guilty taking on a mantle or a label or a role when they know there are other people that have just totally consuming experiences, and you might want to say, well, I'm not in their league, but that does not in any way change the fact that your life is altered, that your life, the decisions you make, how you live your life, the options that are available to you are different
Yeah.
because of your role as a caregiver. Am I right?
You are. And when I decided to take that on and acknowledge that I am a caregiver, and Mark's okay with that too. I wanted him to be okay with me acknowledging that he does need a little bit, or that I'm okay in that role.
Mhm.
But when I took on that role, it allowed me to start the process of, I'm going to use the word grieving. It's a little heavy, but
Yeah.
when you move into a situation where something happens in your family, whatever it is, whether it's, an illness or a setback or a death, you have to grieve what won't happen.
Oh,
It's,
I think you are
yeah,
so wise. You're so smart to say that, because when you don't do that, I think that's when resentment sets in. When you don't acknowledge the reality of the situation, it's not about blame.
yeah,
It's not about
it is.
anything, regardless of what caused the circumstance, right?
Yep.
So I think that's really important. But here's another interesting point. There are a number of people who refuse to consider themselves caregivers. They view the term caregiver as less than or pejorative or something not. um eh, it's really interesting. They don't view it as a positive identifier. And I find that really interesting, because to me it doesn't have a negative or a positive connotation. It just is. It's an acknowledgement of the reality of your circumstance.
Well, and that's my life, is I choose to live in the reality. Uh,
Yeah.
my daughter's a beautiful optimist, and she's like, yeah. And when I talk to my mom, I know I'm talking to a realist over here. So I am the
Yeah.
realist. I'd much rather live in the truth of the situation and then make decisions based on that. This is where we are. This is what
Yep.
it is. And that's what having an open conversation has enabled Mark and I to be honest with each other and acknowledge neither one of us needs to live in denial, because we understand and we have conversation about it. Well, if I'm going to take on the caregiver label, he is going to have to acknowledge that there's something in his life that requires care.
Exactly. So here's the thing. I guess I will never call you Cleopatra,
No,
because you are
I am
not
not the queen of
queen of
denial.
denial. Am I right?
That is not me. And so I'd love to encourage other people to be honest with your situation and to just say, as you just said, it just is. Why
It
why do
just
we
is.
have to feel
And
bad about it or anything like that? No.
yeah, and not get caught up in it and say, oh no, that's not me,
Right.
or whatever, because
Yeah.
it doesn't help the situation.
Mhm.
And that's the whole thing, is what are you doing to make a difficult situation? No one would choose it. No one says, gee, I really hope that my parent or my partner, really needs help, or really is there.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that. And
No.
nobody chooses that. But I guess the thing is, when you're presented with these situations, how do you respond?
Yeah.
How do you react? What are the choices you make?
Right.
And my feeling is, you can, if you are in denial, you can inadvertently make it worse,
Yeah.
or you can find ways to make the best of it. So, um, Monica, when you think about your life now, with Mark, what would you say are the biggest challenges that you face, as in your role as a caregiver, as you define it?
Well, some of these are not as challenging anymore because I've continued to just be at peace with it. But I will say for myself, um, the challenges that we've worked through, one is I like to go out and be around people. And first of all, Mark's an introvert and I'm an extrovert, though I've backed off from that a little bit, in recent years. But I like to and need to go out and be around people. And our friends like Mark, they like him coming around. And so when I go out to something with my friends or an evening engagement, he's often not with me. And he's frequently not with me. And so that's one of the hard things is where's Mark? Well, it's generally known that my husband has a acute physical pain journey, or they know about his vision. That they know about his vision often more than the rest of the pain that he's in. And so when I remind them maybe that he's having a bad day, they're oh yeah yeah yeah. But for me, there's always that feeling of well, gosh, we're not meeting others' expectations. Gosh, Mark could be bringing so much to this engagement, and now here I am having to defend. It's but it goes back to the reality. He's not here not because he doesn't want to be here. He's not here because he just doesn't feel up to it. And he knows if he goes, his pain levels are going to go up. He's going to become miserable. Then he's going to, well, I mean, I feel bad for him. Sometimes he won't let me know even how miserable he is. He'll sit over there and be miserable to help me have a good time. And then I'll go over and talk to him and I can just see the pain rising in his eyes. And we should have left like 45 minutes ago. Um,
So
that's one of the things.
when you are thinking about situations like this, something that you would like to do, but then you have to stop yourself and say, recalculate, how can I, is this, I have to choose. I have to choose, do I do this or do I not do this? And I guess that one of the questions that comes to my mind is, do you find yourself like anticipating situations, as a caregiver and maybe understanding his pain journey and how he responds to things and trying to help him avoid triggers or things that are going to make it worse? And how does that make you feel?
Well, there are events that we will plan and that he needs to show up for. I mean, just kind of holidays, things, some of these things, it's like, no, you have to be at this one. And what do I do for that is I kind of, and I feel a little bit like a nag, because his pattern and his way of doing things is he'll get up in the morning and he'll do his exercises, and then his morning is his productive time. So that's when he'll go and run errands or he'll work on his art or something that he wants to be about. Generally, that happens in the morning. Well, I know if he's overextended himself in the morning, he's not going to be up for the event that we are committed, both of us, to go to in the evening. So then I have to say, you need to take it easy this morning because you said you're going to go with me tonight. And so it can potentially create stress in there because once I have a commitment from him, we've made the decision together, we're going to this event, then I need him to follow through and think about that during the day. So sometimes that can create frustration in me. We don't go
Yeah,
home
and
on time.
I think that that's tricky, and in most marriages, I think.
That even if you feel good.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't back out of this.
I, I had some experience with this. I've been married nearly 40 years. And I think, when you said sometimes you feel like a nag, I think it's really smart to catch yourself, right?
Yeah,
And to
yeah.
say, oh, am I, because, when you push too hard one way, oftentimes the other person may feel the need to resist and almost like, you're not the boss of me,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
And inside you're going, yeah, but if you do this, you're going to be a wreck, and then we're not going to be able to do this. And you said you were going to do this, blah, 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 right?
Exactly.
And so you kind of have to be a psychologist, I think, right? To say, how can you, and especially, I mean, Monica, let's face it, you are a high energy,
Yes.
make things happen kind of a person, right?
Yeah.
And I am sure that you have checklists that have checklists, and that they might be longer than Santa's to-do list, my guess is, right?
I do, yeah.
And when someone else is in slow-mo, but their slow-mo is doing their best and
Right.
all that they can, it can be so frustrating, right? And I think the thing for when we're caring for people who they're given their all, but they're all on, if you're like me, which is, oh well, it's 9 a.m. and I've already accomplished 10 things off my
Right.
to-do list. Isn't that
Right.
amazing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And
yeah, the slow part really is a challenge, and that has been another thing that I've had to do. It's not just the fact that sometimes he feels good and sometimes he doesn't. That plays a part in decision making, which is another part of what's been a challenge. Is, we our personalities are very different, and we've been married for 33 years, and we committed early on to be a team, that we want to talk through things, that I bring things to the conversation and he brings things, and we bring different perspectives. So there's a lot of decisions that we make that we're committed to make them together. And because we've both been self-employed, he's been a great sounding board for me for my business, which has been more active in recent years. But when he's not feeling good, which ebbs and flows, some weeks will be better, and some weeks you just, no, 3 weeks, no, you still don't have the energy to talk to me about this topic. When I'm moving quickly in things and I need a decision made, and he's in a situation where he's been in pain now for a week or two, the decision making capabilities of a person who's in physical pain or in a, pretty challenging place of mental pain, they don't have good decision making abilities. You know, people living in that pain space, it's all they can do to take care of themselves during the day. And so if I have a need where I need you to be my team member and I need you to give me some feedback, or I'm feeling insecure and I just need you to tell me I look pretty in my dress, even something as simple as that, they often don't have the energy to give that. And even though I'm a decisive person, as you might imagine, it I want him to be involved in the decisions. So then I have to decide, when am I going to go ahead and make a decision and move on without him? And when do I just need to wait till we're healthy? And when he feels better, I talk to him about that so we can make some guidelines of, you know, this kind of thing. Yeah, you just need to make the decision and go on. Don't worry about me. That one, well, no, I really want to be a part of that. Can we wait a few weeks or wait till I feel better? Um, so even that, and that's what I see a lot in people who have, more challenging journeys than he and I, and the pain person is in a more debilitating situation. I try and encourage them, if they're having a good day or a good, even a good time, sometimes you need to have a serious conversation when they feel good. They might not want to have that because they just want to enjoy being good, feeling good. But those of us as caregivers, we need some input. We need to hear some things. We want to know how to serve you best and when to stay out of the way. So when our family member or our friend is feeling good, we need some feedback from them about this, because then I just feel like, gosh, what am I going to do? And I feel kind of lonely in that. Does that make
I
sense? I
hear
kind
you.
of
No,
rambled a little bit.
no, it does. It does make sense. And I think it's about really knowing the person that you're caring for, and knowing they're not being difficult. They're not being uncooperative. It's not that they don't care. And so the word that is popping up in my head is empathy, and developing empathy. Like, one of the worst things that you can say to a person who's in really severe pain is to say, oh, I know how you feel. I got a paper cut the other day. It's killing me. And you're like, no, I don't think you have a clue about how I'm feeling. So one of the things that I learned to do was to imagine. Now, I am a migraine sufferer, and I experience migraines, fortunately, much less frequently now. But when I get them, the other good thing is I have prescription medicine and it works. But if I forget to take it, or if I don't take it, I mean, I have migraines that I am laying on the bathroom floor and I have bodily fluids coming out all different places, and it is not pretty. It is not pleasant. It's so bad I can't even look at my phone to when I worked at my PDJ, my pesky day job, that I couldn't even call my supervisor to say I wasn't coming in because it was that bad. The pain was that severe. So I would think back to that moment of my pain that I could relate to and imagine their pain is probably 100 times worse than that. And I couldn't function.
Or it's
Right.
ongoing and they can't get out of it.
Exactly. And there is no respite. There is no hope about, oh, if I just get, take my migraine medicine in 2 hours, I'm going to be okay.
Right.
When that option doesn't even exist, I can't imagine how bad that must be. But it can really make you appreciate how hard they're trying, how hard it is for them to do things that those of us who don't suffer from pain in that way that we just take for granted. And another thing I think about is, and we're talking about physical pain with Mark, but people who suffer mental anguish, people who suffer anxiety, panic attacks, depression. There are an awful lot of people in my family who live with these things, and I'm so grateful that it has not been a problem for me personally. But I've learned to respect and appreciate and be supportive. And I tried to think of a time that was the closest thing that I ever got to a panic attack, which was being on a roller coaster. And I hate roller coasters. And this was a baby roller coaster by most people's standards. But I'm sitting in this roller coaster and I hear click, 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 click going up to the top. I honestly saw a ladder and I thought, okay, I could lift this bar up and maybe I could climb down this ladder before it goes down the first hill, because I was feeling that anxious and that stressed. And people who suffer from anxiety and panic attacks feel like that all the time or a lot. And I just remember how horrible that feeling is. So I try to find small examples in my life and imagine it amplified by 100-fold or 1,000-fold to help me have empathy and not feel resentment or anger or frustration when people that I'm caring for are not responding in the way that I am or the way that I wish that they were. Does that make sense to you?
It does, and it brings to mind another thing. We have our journey going on in our family, right? Well, a friend of mine in my industry got very sick and a severe disease that ultimately took his life. And he was in a wheelchair and he came to events still in the wheelchair and he taught many of us. I mean, just, the consummate teacher, even when he was ill, was teaching us how to understand people in a wheelchair, understand people with different needs. And just because I work with it in my family doesn't mean I'm automatically transferring that to other people. So I will say, though, that it has improved my compassion for them, but it has been a conscious thing. Just because I'm that way at home, I may even be, still taking out my frustration that I feel with my husband, maybe on somebody else who's in a situation of need. Why can't you move faster? When what I'm really wishing is down in my heart, I'm saying, why can't you make a decision quicker? Maybe that was what I walked away from this morning was I need you to make a decision. And then I go out and there's a person in a cane in front of me in line. And I'm like, can you just come? In my mind, I'm feeling that. So I think we can transfer those feelings because we don't want to take them out on our loved one. And so I've used these learning opportunities to help me just have compassion in general and recognize that if I'm not feeling compassion, that I just tell myself to just back away from the situation because I certainly don't want to give anyone any more angst than they're already struggling with, other pain people. But I have to recognize that I might have some weird things going on there that I don't fully understand, which is fine. But I recognize either I'm feeling impatient or I'm feeling compassionate. So it causes me to take some action with other people, like say, if I'm feeling impatient, to just back away, or if I'm feeling observant and ready to engage the situation, then I'll engage it in a positive way just because I have the awareness.
And awareness is so key, because one of the things I think about, so you understand Mark's situation. You're his, you know his limitations, the cues, the signals, like, ooh.
And he's been able to say those to me, and not everybody can communicate those as clearly. Again, this has been a 12-year journey that we've been learning this, but yeah. So I understand his.
So I'm thinking though too about dealing with people in with shopping or people out in cars or whatever, and I think about the invisible disabilities,
Yeah.
and how, for example, if somebody pulls into a handicapped parking spot, and how many times I'm guilty of this, I might give them a little judgy look, like, I don't see a walker there. I don't see a cane.
You don't
Are
look
you
like you're having
really,
trouble.
are you really, are you really allowed to be there? Because, somebody might really need that space. And I don't know that this person has AFib. I don't know that this person, has a vision issue, which
Right.
hopefully they're not driving, but that they, but there are reasons that they are
There
part
are
of it.
reasons. No, there
Yeah.
are reasons. And one of the things that we've kind of come across in our journey as well, working with Social Security disability, which, I mean, I have a lot to say on that, but everybody's experiences are different there.
Mhm.
But going through that and even talking to a few other people about it, people who get Social Security disability, sometimes people say, oh, they just know somebody. Well, if they just know somebody, that's pretty miraculous. I mean, if somebody has received Social Security disability, you have to know there is something seriously wrong that enables them from getting work. I mean,
Oh,
that
yeah.
process is so rigorous. Now, we don't always know that, but sometimes family members will know, yeah, they did get disability, but when they see them, they're showing up. Like if Mark's going to show up, he's going to do his best to engage and
Oh,
laugh and
absolutely.
not show his disabilities, right?
Yep.
So then people say, well, you look like you're fine to me. Well, yeah, you don't know that cost me my whole next day.
Exactly right. When people would come to visit my mom,
Yeah.
and I would be strung out. I hadn't slept the night before. I was exhausted and taking care of stuff. And my mom, she'd be on. She'd be like, oh, and she'd be all sitting up and chirpy and have a little chit chat, right? They would leave and she would collapse, and I'd be like, oh my God.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
That investment with her and a friend cost you
Yeah.
so much time
Yeah.
and energy. And people don't, if they don't have someone around them, and you have to go even the next level, I think, because my mom also had a disability. She was legally blind, so she could not drive. And I got my driver's license at 14. If you are not intimately connected with a person with a pain journey, you really don't see all the rest of this.
No,
But the
no.
next step is that way more people have someone in their family who's struggling with this
Mhm.
than we may realize as well. So some of that is, let's just say, way more of us are in this together than we realize. So what's causing us to put up these walls that we pretend that we're not, or we judge these people and think that they're really not in pain, or all of these things? The fact of the matter is, because this, being a caregiver speaker, and when I go out and I speak and I share just a brief comment about, my husband has this journey and this is what he's doing, people come up to you and share their story.
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
my, yeah. Oh my gosh,
Oh,
this is
yeah.
my story. This is what's happening. And so we
Mhm.
see that there's a lot of people out there who are, quite frankly, doing amazing things.
They are.
So
And you know what this leads me to think about is, when people think about how badly they feel when they look at social media, right?
right.
And they think, oh, everybody's eating these fabulous meals and everybody's house looks so perfect. And look at that gorgeous family. They're so beautifully dressed and oh, blah, 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 and look at me, I'm a wreck. I'm grateful, if I can, put the food in the microwave, or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
and much less make a gourmet meal.
Right.
And I think that people forget that Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and everything else is not real life,
Oh,
that those are highlights, and they're highly edited and choices people make about how they show up.
yeah.
And particularly during a pandemic, when people are not visiting and they're not seeing each other very often, it's really hard to imagine that other people are going through the same or worse frustrations.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's people have a desire to present this image of perfection, because when you are in a caregiving situation, it is an imperfect situation. People are struggling. There's a problem people need help with, whether it's physical or mental or who knows, right? Other
Take my kids
other
for an
challenges.
afternoon, yeah. So I
So
can't
we
think
have
of
to
any.
give ourselves grace. We have
Right.
to give those in our care grace, but we have to step back and give ourselves grace, because let's face it, you can only be your best on any given day. And there are days when we will be short-tempered. There are days when we'll be snappy. There are days when we will not be as compassionate as we wish we could. And we just can't beat ourselves up. We have to say, you know what? I can do better. I can do better. And
Well,
maybe apologize to the person if that's appropriate, and then move on.
but sometimes with that too, it's kind of one of a philosophy because I have a large personality. Yeah, sometimes I know my definition of success for myself is just to not speak and to be quiet and to be in a background or to not say anything. So when I inadvertently react or say something or sound a little uh, loud or snappy, you know, people don't know how many times I haven't said that.
Yeah,
How many times I have chosen to back away or how many times I have chosen to control
right.
myself. And I think I need to say, I mean, I think this is one of the things of this story is I need to say is that how many times have I done the right thing that
Yes.
that never gets acknowledged?
And we
Yeah.
focus when we put our heads on the pillow at night. We relive that awkward moment. We
Right.
relive that time like, oh, I can't believe I said that or something. And I got to tell you, I had more than my share of times when my teenage daughter would say to me after, a little situation with my mom, and she would say to me, Mom, you need to take a nap.
Yeah.
Nothing like a little truth from a 15-year-old.
It's so
So
true.
let me ask you a question, Monica.
Okay.
In the last, let's say, year, okay,
Okay.
if there was one thing you would like to do over, what might that be? What would be a do-over that you wish you could do
Oh,
differently?
now you're asking me to remember one of those things that were painful that I don't really want to do.
Maybe. I mean, just something that you think, "Ah, I wish I could do that over."
Um, I can honestly say nothing is coming to my mind.
Okay.
Which one I'm grateful for,
Yeah.
but two, I I do my very best to not live my life with areas of regret.
Yes.
And so if
Yes.
something comes up that I am going to lose sleep over, I generally will try and make it right with
Yeah.
the person because I know that I can be reactionary and sometimes I hurt people's feelings. And I will do my best to apologize if I can do that, or if I've said
Mhm.
something that was a problem to go back. And even in these situations with Mark, if I will get reactive, and I really can't think of any big things because gratefully we do talk things out. But on those times when I am reactive, I will take a step back and look at myself, and I will say, okay, what's going on? This is something again that we've developed with the ability to have conversation is to know that behind a reaction is another emotion.
Yeah.
You know this
And
too,
and that
Steve.
really speaks so much to the value of being self-aware.
Right,
When look, I'm not at my best right now. This
right.
is not a good time. And being aware of yourself and being aware of Mark is so valuable. Okay, so here's the flip side of that
Oh wait,
question
hold
then.
on. So
Yep,
let
you
me
got
finish
another one?
that thought. So
Yeah.
if I get reactive like that, there's kind of two ways, and the situation may warrant both of them. Do I need to apologize to Mark or my kids or whoever? And if I need to do that, I will do that. But the other thing is sometimes I will say to Mark, and this has taken time because, the person who's in pain is very much personalizing it and I'm causing everybody else trouble, and so they feel insecure in that as well. And we need to understand that's going on in their mind. But some days I'll need to just say to Mark and say, you know what? It's my turn to have a bad day. Okay. We're not talking about this anymore. I'm done. I'm going to go do this. You go do that. You need to let me have a bad day too.
Hmm.
And that's reasonable, and it's reasonable for the person who's ill to know that other people in their house have challenges as well, and sometimes I just need to remind him of that.
Truly, because you do, because it's not about being a caregiver is not about being a martyr. And
Yeah.
it's not about giving up your entire life. And the other thing, is we get to the value of self-care is that if you are not in a good place, if you are not taking care of yourself, you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not eating well, if you're not having mental stimulation outside of your role as a
Right.
caregiver, you're not going to be a very good caregiver. And the person in your care is going to feel like a burden. And the person in your, so when caregivers are actually the worst at taking care of themselves
Yeah.
because we feel guilty about it. It's like, oh, I can't go to a movie because, she can't get out of bed. Or, it's not fair that I can go off on this bike ride or go for this long walk because, they can't leave the house. And,
That
I'm just so selfish.
But that caregiver, and that's what I would want to say to caregivers is you need to have that conversation with your loved one
Yeah.
because they're going to give you permission to do those things. The vast majority of them. Some of them are still very much in their own head and their own, they cannot see beyond to give you that permission.
Sorry.
We are popular this morning, aren't we?
We
On our
are,
phones?
we
We are.
are.
All right. So
It's so true. It's so true.
when
And I will say is to understand the limitations, because obviously if you're dealing with a person living with dementia, their ability to
to give you
have that kind
permission,
of a
you can't.
conversation
No, you
is
can't.
extremely limited. And so you have to have realistic expectations given your knowledge of the person in your care, their cognitive ability,
Totally.
and your
Yeah.
history with
Yeah.
them.
Well, one of
Um,
the things that I do is I travel for business. And so I will often leave on the day, early in the day, so I can have some extra time by myself on
yeah.
the journey. And so
Oh,
that's what that's time that we get apart from each other. And it actually gives both of us a break because we need to acknowledge that we both have expectations. We both have places where we feel like we could be letting the other one down. We both have expectations of things being better or worse. And so when I go away, that actually gives both of us some space. So I'd like to put
oh,
that out there as a challenge is you
it's a
both
gift.
need some space.
You do. And a couple things happen. Let's say there's another person who steps in to help out and does
Yeah.
something. And many caregivers are saying, oh, but mom likes the way I make her, I'm the only one. I'm the only one who could,
That martyr
do
thing again.
X. Yeah, exactly. Right. But here's what happens when somebody else takes over. The person really appreciates you
Yeah.
because they realize, oh, I
What
really
you're doing.
love how they prepare that for me, or how they help me do this, or how they make me feel, right?
Yeah.
That's number one. And so missing you is a good thing
Yeah.
because they can miss you and they can appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah.
And with that you're there. And so I think that that's really important, as long as the person is safe. I mean, we're not talking about putting them in jeopardy or, leaving them on their own if they're not able to be left on their own, in different situations.
Right.
But I think that's an important thing. And it's about giving yourself permission to take care of yourself and losing the guilt and say, you know what, I'm doing this, so I'm going to be in a better place to take care of you.
Yep. Exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. So what would you say, Monica, have been some of the best help or resources that you have found, or that you know of other people that have found when they've been in a caregiving situation and they're like, I don't know what I don't know.
Well, being an educator, I am always kind of reading about things and I teach a lot in the real estate venue. And one of the classes actually that helped give me a lot of understanding of resources was the senior real estate specialist designation. Now, we're caregiving for people in all age groups. However, there's some kind of acknowledgement that as people age, they're going to need care. So there's some openness in that. And then I also have had a friend who has been the caregiver for her grandmother, and that was also a close situation that I was observing. And I think one of the best tools for us has just been to continually seek resources that will help us.
Yeah.
In her situation, that was finding adult daycare. They couldn't afford for their grandmother to go into any kind of an assisted living situation, but there was adult daycare. They were always looking for situations that were VA benefits. Are there any state benefits? And Mark and I have shared that that's something that we keep doing too. Is there something else that can help us? So always being on the search for some system or some treatment or something else a podcast that's going to give us a new idea that we can try or have conversation. So I think as far as tools, there's no one tool.
Right.
And we have to just keep looking and say, what's available? Ask people. Don't be afraid to, even if you're a person who doesn't really want or can't get help in your home for whatever reason, are you the person who can say, what resources do you know about? Oh, can you help me fill out this application? Maybe we can get some administrative help from a family member if we can't get some
Exactly.
physical care help.
It's so true. I will just share that when my mom was really, really declining and I was over the edge and I was not in a good place. And I met up with a group of friends that I hadn't seen in maybe a year. And I started to tell them about my mom and how frail and how much she had declined. And one of them looked at me and said, well, Breeda, have you considered hospice? And my first thought was, oh no, she's not that bad, because I, in my ignorance, thought hospice just meant when you're right at the end of life, when you only have a couple of days and that's it. And she very gently explained to me that hospice was all about comfort care and that they could provide supportive resources to me as
Yeah.
long as mom qualified. And anyway, it was an eye opener and it was no cost. Her Medicare covered everything.
Yeah.
And I honestly can say hospice saved my life. And my mom was in hospice care for 7 months. And the quality of her life and my life greatly, greatly increased. But I had no idea. And it wasn't until I shared and vented with these girlfriends
Yeah.
that one
Who
of
you
them,
hardly ever saw.
who I hardly ever saw. And the one, it was a friend who was more of an acquaintance. And it turns out she was a social worker.
Oh my gosh.
And she was a hospice social worker.
Oh my
So she
gosh.
really knew what she was talking about. I had no idea.
You had no idea.
Never occurred to me that that would be an appropriate thing to do or the right thing to do. And I am forever grateful for that. So when you talk to friends, be honest. You never know what somebody is going to know or have an idea that might really be helpful.
They may have been on that journey and have something exactly like that. And I wanted to
And
say,
people don't talk about it. People
no,
do not talk about it.
no. But once you open the door to be vulnerable, other people will come in and you can mutually help each other.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to say, you mentioned that your mom had Medicare and that was able to provide some resources. I'm pretty sure in Tennessee, all hospice care is not at any cost. So
Yeah.
I just want to, for any of our listeners who might want to investigate that, states are different with that kind of thing. So please
Yeah.
investigate. Some of those benefits are different from state to state and county to
Sure.
county, yeah, as far as that.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
all right, I know we need to wrap up. Uh,
But I do
I
have
do
a
have a
really, I have
children's
an
question.
important, yeah, this
Okay.
is the big question I wanted to ask you for, is that how do you think that we as caregivers can help children who are either living with a family member that has a disability or a pain issue or a mental issue that, their lives are greatly impacted as the quote healthy one? And how can we make sure that we look out for them
Yeah.
and be mindful of their situation?
Well, let me first say, I'm going to add my thoughts to this and I welcome yours because my children were mostly grown or teenagers when Mark started really going through his physical pain journey. And my mom's situation, they saw her from afar, so it wasn't an immediate effect. I look at these groups that I'm in on Facebook where they talk about the pain journey in their family. And some of these people are in their 20s and 30s and they have small children. I've had friends talk to me and, they'll say, well, somebody in my family is really in pain and then my parent or the other caregiver has made light of what the children need. Either
Yeah.
what happens to the children is, they need a new outfit, they need a Halloween costume, they need things that, normal, whatever that is,
Right.
families will, oh yeah, we'll put that together. And I do have to say that any Halloween costumes in my house were created by my kids, so they've always been challenged in that area. But using that as an example, whether it's a project or a homework, or they want to buy some special outfit at the store, and the caregiving parent or family member is generally so tired. And
Yeah.
I think that the children's needs sometimes are belittled and, not really made fun of, but they seem to be not important in light of this person's major problem.
Or
And
made to feel guilty for even asking for
asking,
something.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
so I just really want to mention to the caregivers not to create any burden, any more burden for them. But I think this goes back into the conversation of it's so much, it's so important to not be in denial, to recognize, and children even can have honest conversations. If a child asks you, they've seen a new outfit at the store and they really want something like that, and they ask you for it, and you just don't have the energy or the money's not there, I I believe that the children will respond better to an honest conversation with a plan to do something different or special, or how can we address that, further on down the line. Children respond better to honesty like that, even though, some of that, if it keeps going on over the long term and their denial is ongoing, it will cause them, I think, to close up. um, I just want to encourage caregivers to recognize that your person who is needy may be another child, it may be a spouse. Please recognize, and somehow in your journey, if you can, choose to recognize what your other children are going through, because they don't know how to handle it, they don't understand it. And there's also that concept of, remember that what children grow up with in their family is what they see as normal. Um,
Yes.
and
And Monica, one other
yeah,
point of view that I would bring up is
yeah,
for siblings of a child with, let's say, a really
like a cerebral
medical,
palsy kind of a something.
yeah, something that is a
One of those things. Yeah,
lifelong illness,
yeah,
that those siblings, they're also worried about, oh, what happens when mom and dad are gone? And
mm,
I'm going to be the caregiver. I'm going to be the one that needs to take care of all this stuff. And so when you think about that in another invisible burden,
right.
another invisible sense of responsibility that siblings live with every single day, it's an important thing to show them that you are taking care of yourself,
Yeah,
that you are doing the best that you're able. They know it's not easy. They can see it. They live it every single day. But what kind of an example are you setting for them as a caregiver, that not only is it important to care for the person in need, but it's really important to care for yourself.
yeah. That the thing with the children like that, it's important to address their needs, but it's also important to remember that there are going to be some beautiful things that will grow in those
Oh, yeah.
children because of what they've seen. And so we always want to recognize that these challenging situations, there will always be challenges. But as we press in and be honest and consider them and respect each other, there often are some really beautiful things, some beautiful awarenesses that come out of it, that make the whole family stronger if they'll lean into it and be honest about their
Yeah,
challenges.
to help children learn compassion and empathy
Yeah.
is one of the greatest gifts that you as a parent can give to children
Yep.
and to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Be nice to your, try. That's one of the things. Can we all try and at least speak nice to each other? And I would encourage anybody listening to this, if you're a pain person and you're having a hard time talking to your caregiver, please try and find a way to have the conversation with them, because you're both worried about each other and you're both concerned about yourselves in another place.
And it's not a choice.
That place.
They're not
Yeah.
choosing to be in pain. They're not choosing to make life difficult. And I think that's an important thing to remember, that it's not their fault.
No, it's not their fault. And caregivers, it's not your fault.
Right.
So it just is. So let's work with what just is rather than what's not.
And just let's look really hard and look deep every day to find some grace in all of it,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep. Do you have any closing words for caregivers, Breeda, that you want to help us
Yeah,
wrap up with?
just, God bless you. that know that
Some of us see you.
we do see you, and it is, when I was my mom's caregiver, let me just say that it was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that I had people in my life who were so helpful, who helped me to do it. And I think on most days to do it pretty well, not every day.
Yeah.
but it's put me in a position right now that I would not be in had I not had that experience. And my mom, I loved her dearly, and she's been gone now for nearly a decade. And but she's with me every day, and I know I did the best I could on any given day. Some days were better than others. So keep that in your heart, and just do your best.
Yep. Be kind to yourself.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you.
And
so
take a
much.
break before you break, right?
Take it. There you go. That's your line. Take a break before you break. Awesome.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Breeda, for joining me today.
Thank you.